Nobody in that prison had the slightest clue that the most dangerous woman in the block was right there, sitting with a tray of food, getting pushed around by the most feared inmate on the tier. And that woman? She was the new fish. Small, quiet, no ink, no gang ties, nothing on her record that explained why she'd ended up in a place like Raven Rock. A clerical screw-up, maybe. Some figured easy prey for Harper Pitbull Collins, the queen of the block, now staring at her like a wolf sizing up a lamb. "Up, now! That's my table!" Harper growled, her voice low and rough, like concrete grinding under boots. The rookie didn't flinch, didn't even look up. She just kept eating. The scrape of her fork against the metal tray cut through the silence like a dare, a hiss of defiance that spread across the cafeteria. And then everything froze. Conversations died mid-sentence, like someone had pulled the plug on the world. Every eye locked on them. No one breathed too loud. No one stepped in. Everyone knew the rule. When Harper felt disrespected, somebody bled before dessert. Harper wasn't just a bully. She was a living legend in that block. She'd knocked out teeth for less, shredded uniforms with one hand. Even the guards looked the other way to keep the peace. And now someone had the guts to defy her. By eating. That someone was Emily Carter. Eyes on her food, movement steady like a monk in the middle of a firefight. The storm around her didn't touch her. She chewed slow, as if time itself was on her side. Harper stormed closer, fists slamming the table. The crack echoed like a muffled explosion. A cup of water trembled, leaving a wet ring on the steel. Emily's fork clattered to the floor, sharp and final. "I said get up," Harper barked again, her jaw tight, eyes narrowed to slits. She expected fear. A plea, a flinch. But what she saw was worse. Emily finally lifted her gaze, straight into Harper's eyes. No fear, no begging, just something cold, calculated. A flicker so fast most missed it, but enough to freeze the air. One wrong move, and any rookie would have been done for. But Emily wasn't just anybody. Her breathing was controlled, her body coiled, ready for something no one in that room could anticipate. The silence pressing down on the cafeteria was almost painful, stretching each second to the breaking point. Harper leaned in closer, her face inches away. Emily, still seated, bent just enough to scoop the fork off the floor, laying it casually on her tray. Just a fork. But her muscles tensed, weight shifted, eyes locked like someone who knew exactly what was coming. And for those watching closely, the truth hit. Harper wasn't the hunter. Emily was. The whole room held its breath. Even the guards at the far end traded uneasy glances but didn't move. Too late for that. And then, for the first time since she'd set foot in Raven Rock, Emily Carter spoke. Calm, low, unshaken. "If I were you, I'd pick another table." Harper jerked back just an inch, shocked by the audacity, but that sliver of hesitation was all it took. Everyone saw it. Something had shifted. For the first time, the predator looked like she was measuring the prey. What none of them knew was that Emily Carter wasn't some clerical mistake. She wasn't easy pickings. Her arrival at Raven Rock was no accident. And in that grey cafeteria, under the weight of dozens of silent witnesses, the game began. A game that would flip the prison's entire hierarchy on its head. Raven Rock Federal Penitentiary wasn't just a prison. It was a living organism where time ran differently and every block had its own set of rules. The guards knew keeping order didn't mean serving justice. It meant keeping the balance of power intact. And Harper Collins was one of those powers. Until now. After the silent standoff in the cafeteria, Emily was moved to Cell 2B, a wing reserved for inmates who had stirred up what the warden liked to call unusual disturbances. She walked the concrete halls under eyes heavy with a mix of respect and curiosity. No insults, no catcalls, no cheap shots. It was like everyone had already realized something new had entered their ecosystem, something that didn't play by the old rules. Her new cellmate, Denise "Rat" Morales, was the kind of woman who survived on brains over brawn, small, sharp, with the most valuable ears in the block. Denise knew who owed what, who was hooking up with who, and exactly when fights were about to break out. She watched Emily like you'd watch a live grenade sitting on the floor. "No one pulls what you pulled and makes it past the next meal. You know that, right?" Denise muttered, while tying an old sheet around her mattress to keep the thin foam from falling apart. Emily didn't bite. She sat quietly, cleaning the laces of her sneakers with the focus of someone who needed to keep her mind busy. That calm wasn't arrogance, it was calculation. Every second of silence was a wall she built between herself and the rest of the world. Meanwhile, Harper Collins was burning up inside. The humiliation ate at her worse than any scar. Never in years of running her block with an iron fist had anyone stared her down like that. And worse, she had no idea who this woman was. Emily Carter had no gang ties, no affiliations, no record that matched up. She had just appeared. The next day, during yard time, the women's unit spilled into the concrete square. High walls, guard towers that looked but rarely intervened. Harper walked with her two loyal shadows, Brenda, a hulking brute with scarred knuckles, and Lou, infamous for sticking a shiv in you before you saw her coming. Even with muscle flanking her, there was hesitation in Harper's stride. Emily's name was already spreading like wildfire, whispered in every corner of Raven Rock, a storm building before the clouds even rolled in. Emily sat alone under the weak sun, an old paperback open in her lap. What drew attention wasn't her presence, but her lack of fear. In a place where posture could get you killed, she sat unarmored. From the tower, Sergeant Nolan, one of the few guards who actually paid attention, studied her closely. A war vet, Nolan could read body language better than any report. What he saw in Emily wasn't inmate posture, it was military. Her movements were economical. Her eyes scanned her surroundings in steady, timed intervals. This was someone trained to always be on alert. It was Denise who stumbled onto the truth first. Hidden inside Emily's dictionary, she found a torn, laminated scrap of paper, half a military ID. One side showed the name in bold, Major Emily Carter, Active Intelligence. The other half had a handwritten note, Infiltrate, Monitor, Neutralize. Denise didn't breathe a word. She tucked the secret away like currency. But inside, panic brewed. Emily wasn't there by chance. She was on assignment. And if the government had planted her in Raven Rock, it meant someone or something inside those walls was worth the risk. As tension mounted, Harper plotted her payback. But for the first time, it wasn't impulsive. It was careful, quiet, driven by the kind of fear that hides under rage. And in prison, fear dressed as anger was deadlier than open fury. On the third night during bed check, a mattress in Block C went up in flames. Alarms blared. Guards rushed in. In the chaos, a shadow slipped past Emily's cell with a makeshift blade in hand. But the bunk was empty. The hit failed. Another silent warning. She knew. Piece by piece, Emily Carter stopped being just the mysterious rookie. She became something else entirely, a riddle no one could solve, a ghost in a soldier's body, a threat wrapped in silence. And what nobody realized yet was that her presence in Raven Rock was only the beginning. What she carried inside those walls went far beyond the prison's reach. The next morning after the fire, the cell doors opened later than usual. A deliberate delay. Guards walked the halls slower, their boots echoing heavy against the concrete. The air felt thick, like everyone was waiting for a spark to set it off. Inmates carried the same silent question in their eyes. Why was Emily Carter still breathing? The cafeteria wasn't the same anymore. The bench where Emily used to sit now stayed empty, even when she wasn't there. It wasn't just a seat. It had become a no-go zone. No inmate dared to touch it, not even the veterans. Harper, on the other hand, had all but vanished from routine. She spent her days tucked away in the infirmary, complaining about migraines and old aches. But everyone knew what it really was. She just needed time. Emily acted like nothing had changed. Up early, organized, methodical, speaking little. She followed protocol to the letter and kept her distance from everyone. Even Denise, her cellmate, felt more and more out of place. Emily treated her with cold respect, like someone keeping alive the one witness who might still be useful, but never trustworthy. Whispers began circling through the halls, questions even the guards couldn't answer. Who was Emily's real target? Was she here for Harper, for some gang, or something bigger higher up the chain? The lack of answers only raised the stakes. Raven Rock was a pressure cooker, and the valve was about to blow. Meanwhile, Sergeant Nolan started digging on his own. With access to restricted files, he noticed Emily's records didn't line up. The medical report had swapped information. No required vaccinations, no prior convictions, no defense attorney on file, just a name and a sentence. Emily Carter was a shadow, and Nolan knew shadows don't show up without purpose. One afternoon in the laundry detail, Brenda, one of Harper's loyal soldiers, accidentally dropped a bar of soap near Emily. When Emily bent down, Brenda lunged with a blade hidden between her fingers. Clear intent, but there was no scream, no blood. Emily spun, caught Brenda's wrist mid-air, and twisted with surgical precision. A sharp crack, a muffled cry. Brenda collapsed, writhing on the floor. The blade clattered away, kicked under the pile of clothes. Guards rushed in, but nothing stuck. Witnesses stayed quiet. The incident got written off as a workplace accident. Once again, Emily walked away untouched. The women's block split down the middle. On one side, those who admired Emily's quiet strength. On the other, those who feared what they couldn't understand. And right in the middle of it all, Harper, cornered, her reputation bleeding out. In Raven Rock, that meant a slow death. That's when a new player stepped in. Dr. Reeds, the prison psychologist, requested a one-on-one session with Emily. Officially, just a routine evaluation. Unofficially, a chance to pry at the mask. Emily didn't resist. She walked into the white-walled office, sat in the wooden chair, and waited in silence. "Do you feel threatened here?" Reeds asked, pen frozen above the paper. "No." Emily's voice was calm, unhurried. "Is there anything you'd like to say about the other inmates? They do what they think they have to do. And you? What are you here to do?" Emily didn't answer. She only lifted her gaze, locking eyes with the doctor. There was a military coldness there, but buried beneath it, something broken. "If I told you I wasn't here by choice, that would be a lie," she said at last. "But I didn't come here for nothing either." The session ended right there. Days later, rumors swept through the block. Lou, another of Harper's enforcers, had disappeared. Her cell was locked from the outside, but empty inside. Guards blamed a counting error. Inmates whispered, "Silent execution." Denise heard it all, and sleep stopped coming. That night, she confronted Emily in the dark of their cell. "Tell me the truth, are you here for her?" "No." "Then who?" Emily hesitated. The silence weighed heavier than the answer. "For the woman no one's noticed yet, the one about to die." Denise went pale. Every word landed like a hammer. Emily spoke like someone who had already mapped out the end, like someone just waiting for the right moment. At the same time, Harper was moving in the shadows. She bribed a rookie guard with promises of protection in exchange for access to the surveillance system. She dug through files, followed threads, and finally she found Emily's origin. Major Carter, Black Ops, Afghanistan War, trained in infiltration, interrogation, and internal neutralization. She wasn't an inmate, she was a weapon. And Harper understood. She was never the target. She was the obstacle. The next night, the alarms blared again, not for fire, not for a breakout, A prisoner had been found unconscious in her cell, a note tucked in her pocket. It was Denise. The note carried only one name, Emily Carter, and now the whole prison knew. Harper's story was unraveling. The guards were divided. The women's block was ready to implode. And Emily, more isolated than ever, kept walking through predators like she already knew the ending to a book no one else had read. But even for her, what came next was beyond prediction. The letter found with Denise hit like a bomb. Emily Carter's name, now out in the open among both officers and inmates, set Raven Rock's underworld on fire. Guards began watching her with armed caution. Inmates who once eyed her with curiosity now avoided her out of pure survival instinct. But Emily didn't back down. She stuck to her routine with surgical precision, as if nothing had changed, like everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. In the admin wing, Sergeant Nolan started connecting dots. With help from a security tech, he dug up old transfer footage of Emily arriving at Raven Rock. 2 men from the federal escort didn't exist in any database. No IDs, no ranks. It was as if she'd been delivered by ghosts. This wasn't a regular prison drop-off. This was a mission planted inside a lie. Dr. Reeds, the prison psychologist, pushed for more sessions. In one, she went straight at Emily. "You know Denise was silenced." "She knew too much," Emily answered, cold. "And it wasn't because of me." "You're saying there's someone else operating in here?" Emily didn't reply. She only glanced at the clock on the wall. The silence said more than any confession could. Meanwhile, Harper, cornered and unraveling, looked for allies. She turned to an old rival, Sister Lilith, matriarch of a cult that ruled the isolation block. Lilith was feared even by the guards, and her word carried law among the women who followed her rituals. Harper offered protection. Lilith offered eyes. Now every move Emily made was watched, not just by Harper, but by new players she hadn't crossed paths with before. The air inside Raven Rock shifted, colder, tighter, as if the building itself sensed something deadly about to surface. In the maintenance wing, restricted to only a handful of inmates, an open hatch was discovered. Beside it, an envelope filled with unreadable documents. Emily had been there. The audio tech who filed the report swore he'd logged it, but it vanished before anyone saw it. Coincidence? No. Control. It was Brenda, her arms still strapped up after her failed attack, who cracked first. In exchange for a transfer, she gave up a detail. Emily had been seen talking to one of the prison doctors in the dead of night, well past curfew, but there was no record. The doctor's name didn't exist in the system. Emily had come in alone, but she wasn't alone. The days that followed were marked by strange absences. Inmates disappeared for a night and returned like nothing had happened. Guards rotated shifts with no explanation. Admin staff began holding closed-door meetings more and more often. It felt like the whole prison had switched to containment mode. And Emily, she just watched, waiting. In the library, empty most days, Emily met Nolan. That afternoon, the cameras were mysteriously offline. "They know who you are," he whispered, "and now they want to use you. They think they know, but they're aiming at the wrong target." "Then what's the right one?" Emily flipped a page in the dossier, hidden inside a crime novel. An old photo was tucked there. A young woman in a guard's uniform, clipboard in hand. In the corner, a note scrawled by hand. "Embedded agent, in position since 2012. "That woman," Nolan murmured. "She's higher on the food chain than anyone here, and everyone thinks she's just another staffer." The mission shifted. Emily wasn't in Raven Rock for Harper. Harper was bait. The real target was buried in the system, protected, hidden under layers of bureaucracy and dust. As the walls closed in, Harper had her final meeting with Lilith. The cult leader's eyes burned with something unearthly as she told Harper, "The war's already started, and you're not part of it, you just don't know it yet." The next night, a controlled blast took out power to half the south wing. A blackout. 48 seconds of total darkness. Enough time for Emily to leave her cell, access the surveillance hub, and pull a hidden flash drive from the server's core. She returned, laying on her bunk as if she'd never moved. When the lights snapped back on, the screaming started. Harper's cell was wide open, shelves stripped bare, no fight, no blood, just a message smeared in lipstick on the mirror. It wasn't you. Chaos erupted. Guards triggered red protocol, drones deployed, doors sealed. The cafeteria converted into a holding pen. But Emily, already back in her bunk, pretended to be asleep. The next day, Harper reappeared, naked, disoriented, in the central yard on her knees. No memory. The word cut carved into her left shoulder. When questioned, she repeated the same phrase over and over. She knows everything. The prison shifted that day. The hierarchy collapsed. Guards began transfers. Lilith vanished from her rituals, and Emily became untouchable, not by protection, but by fear. She was a ghost. A presence no one dared provoke, but her mission wasn't done. Raven Rock's routines had been gutted from the inside. Fear had switched sides. Guards no longer walked with authority. They shuffled like pawns in a game they didn't understand. Harper, once the symbol of dominance, was now an empty shell in the infirmary, sedated, shaking at her own reflection. Emily was untouchable, not because anyone shielded her, but because no one knew what she was anymore. An agent, a monster, an experiment. The silence around her was sharper than any blade hidden in the cells. That's when the warden finally showed her face. Miranda Cho, 58. 2 full terms of silent rule, never seen by inmates, rarely even spoken of by her own staff. Her presence was legend. They said when she appeared, someone disappeared. That morning, she walked in with 2 nameless feds at her side. She bypassed the common blocks, went straight to the tower, shut down the cafeteria, cut all outside comms, and asked for one name, Emily Carter. In the cold office, where the lights seemed dimmer than usual, the 2 women faced each other for the first time. The warden sat across from the woman who had dismantled an entire ecosystem without raising her voice once. "This wasn't part of the deal," Miranda said, firm but measured. "I improvised," Emily answered, arms folded. "You were supposed to watch. Just watch, and let her walk." No. The silence between them was a battlefield, past against present. Miranda wasn't just a bureaucrat. She had been Emily's superior during the black years of covert ops. She'd signed off on the original mission, but now the roles had flipped. Emily didn't follow orders anymore. She tore them down. "You crossed a line. The asset's identity is blown." "I wasn't here for the asset." "Then who?" Emily slid the flash drive across the table. Hidden files, footage, recordings, psychological torture logs, human experiments conducted on inmates labeled disposables. A black site lab operating under Miranda Cho's authority. She wasn't just complicit, she was the architect. The real target had always been her. Emily hadn't come to capture anyone. She'd come to burn the system down from the inside. And now, with proof in hand, she could end it. But Miranda, cold and calculating, still had cards left to play. "You think you're walking out of here with this?" she asked. Emily smiled for the first time. "I already have." Back in the infirmary, Harper's cell was empty. The doped-up body lying on her bed wasn't hers, a swap, a trick. While the feds scrambled in panic, Emily walked calmly out the back exit, disguised as a nurse, Miranda's official badge clipped to her waist. Denise, who everyone thought had collapsed in her cell days earlier, was with her, part of the plan from the start. The transport van slipped out toward the outskirts of Reno. In the back seat, Emily tore open another envelope. New coordinates, another prison, another name. "You ready to do this again?" Denise asked, still shaken. "This isn't a mission, it's a cleanup," Emily replied. Raven Rock was just the first pillar. As the van vanished down the highway, Raven Rock was locked down. Federal agents took control. Miranda Cho was arrested before sundown. The files spread. The story hit national headlines. A black operation exposed, a prison dismantled, and one woman gone without a trace. But the story was far from over. What happened at Raven Rock couldn't be buried. Within the first 24 hours after the files leaked, the press shattered the wall of silence the prison system had tried to build. Headlines exploded across every screen. Illegal experiments on inmates exposed by undercover operative. The image of Miranda Cho being escorted by federal agents toward a helicopter became the symbol of a collapsing empire. But while the world scrambled to piece together what had gone down, Emily Carter was already 2 cities ahead, living under a false name, carrying a mission spreading like cracks in a condemned building. She didn't celebrate. To her, taking down Raven Rock wasn't victory. It was unfinished business, payback for an old mistake she could never stomach in silence. Across the country, a shadow circle known only as Order 9 held an emergency meeting. Former generals, intelligence consultants, and public figures with spotless resumes and dirty hands sat around the table. They were the ones who kept black site prisons like Raven Rock running, hidden from the state's eyes. Emily had toppled one piece, but now the whole board shook. Her name was whispered in rooms with bulletproof glass. On paper, she was labeled a rogue asset. In reality, she'd become a systemic threat. What unsettled the order most was simple. Emily knew too much. Not just about Raven Rock, but about the entire network of ghost prisons, funded by dead agencies and buried budgets where inmates were treated like lab rats. Denise was hidden under a new identity. Publicly, she lay in a coma at a state infirmary. Privately, she was now the key witness to an operation no one dared admit existed. Her days were spent watching news reports she herself had helped set in motion. But the relief burned bitter. Emily had made it clear, Raven Rock was only the beginning. Inside the ruins of the system, survivors were dragged through interrogations. Brenda was shipped off to solitary in Ohio. Lou was found hanging. No signs of struggle. Lilith was deported. No trial, no paper trail. The walls had fallen, but the secrets inside them still breathed, and they all knew Emily was free. In her high-security cell, Miranda Cho received a visit from a nameless lawyer. He signed nothing, left no card. He just said, "She's the first. You knew this was coming." Miranda laughed. "She was the best we ever had. We made her, and now you'll have to hunt her." Meanwhile, Emily shifted course. Her new target had been on the map long before Raven Rock. Blackridge, officially listed as decommissioned. But the second flash drive told a different story. An underground facility still active, holding more than 50 unregistered inmates. She checked into a roadside motel, walls peeling, TV flickering static. On the bed, she opened the next dossier. This one hit harder, a single name scrawled in old handwriting, Sophia Ward. Location, unknown. Last seen, Blackridge. Her sister. For the first time, the mission had a face. Everything up to this point, Raven Rock, Harper, Miranda, was only a path leading here. The truth was buried in Blackridge, and the people who'd kept it from her years ago were still hiding behind its walls. But Emily was ready. The war that had started in silence was about to make noise, and every name tied to it would learn what it felt like to be hunted. Emily Carter wasn't fueled by rage, not by hate. She kept moving because someone had to carry what everyone else buried. But staring at the name Sophia Ward, something cracked inside her, a quiet fracture that spread with every mile toward the unknown. Years ago, she and Sophia had been inseparable. Raised apart, lost to the system only to find each other too late. Sophia was Emily's opposite, warm, fiery, reckless. 5 years earlier, she vanished after being arrested for alleged ties to radical activism. A case buried, filed away, erased. Emily searched, but the harder she pulled, the deeper the truth hid. Until Blackridge. Getting there cost her disguises, forged papers, bribes, and trades of blood for intel. She tapped into a network of burned-out ex-operatives, ghosts of the system. In exchange for names, she gave them codes. In exchange for codes, she gave them traitors, commanders, handlers. Every deal was poison. Every step would damn her in any court. But she got what she needed: a map, an access point, and Sophia's last trace, 2019, surveillance footage of her entering Blackridge. No images after. Emily set up camp 2 kilometers out, in the thick woods. For 2 nights, she tracked guard rotations, drone sweeps, generator cycles. Everything pointed to the same truth. Blackridge still beat beneath the earth like a rotten heart. On the 3rd night, she went in. No alarms, no firefight, just hallways of dust and shadow until she found it. The central elevator, disguised as a breaker box, 6 levels down. Silence pressing in like a vice. Underground, it was a ghost city. Empty cells, abandoned labs, systems dead. The place reeked of recent cleaning, but the dried blood in the corners told another story. They had evacuated. Or worse, they'd been waiting. In the medical wing, she found what she dreaded: files, photos, recordings. Sophia subjected to sensory deprivation, extreme isolation, simulated death. Behavioral architects trying to remold her into an invisible weapon. She was one of their prized subjects until she broke. Emily collapsed against the cold concrete wall. Alone, she let herself cry. Silent cracks in the armor she'd carried for years. There was no manual for this. No tactic for burying a sister who might still be alive, or might already be nothing but a ghost. But grief didn't stop her. She stood, collected everything: hard drives, notes, tapes, and left one thing behind: a handwritten letter signed only E. Carter, a warning for whoever dared reopen that hole in the world. On the way out, resistance. 2 men in black tactical gear waited, no insignia, rifles raised. She didn't plead, didn't hesitate. She struck like an animal, precise as a surgeon. The first went down with a crushed windpipe, the second faltered. She didn't. 2 shots, leg and shoulder, enough to keep them breathing, enough to make them remember. Back in the woods, bleeding, exhausted, hollow, she made camp. That night was the first in years she slept without a weapon in hand, not because she felt safe, because she felt nothing. At dawn, her encrypted phone buzzed. New mission, target, General Matthew Connors, last known overseer of Blackridge. Location, Washington, D.C. He was the man who signed Sophia's disappearance order. Emily didn't hesitate. She rose again. She walked again. Not for justice, not for peace, but because moving forward was the only way to stay alive. Her war wouldn't end here. It had only just gotten personal. Emily didn't slip into Washington like a shadow. She came in like a storm warning, unseen from a distance, impossible to ignore up close. She knew this city. She'd been here under orders before, surrounded by suits who talked about wars they'd never fight. Now she was back alone, one name in her sights and one goal in her head: expose the architect of the hell that destroyed her sister. General Matthew Connors wasn't a ghost. He was a legend, former director of the Special Intervention Agency, publicly respected, privately feared. His retirement was quiet, but his reach still ran through black channels the Senate wouldn't touch. He was the last pillar, and the most dangerous one. Emily set up in an abandoned penthouse in Foggy Bottom. Through cracked windows, she had a direct line of sight to the building where Connors worked as a national security strategic advisor. The title was cover. That was where targets were chosen, black sites signed off, and institutions bent. That was where the name Sophia Ward had been erased. For 4 days, Emily watched the building. She mapped entry routes, surveillance rhythms, the precise moments Connors came and went. He used only the private elevator, biometric access. Problematic. But Ravenrock had taught her that armored doors don't hold against someone who knows the system from the inside. While she planned, She shipped copies of the Blackridge files to 3 investigative journalists, one in New York, one in London, and a third, nameless, buried deep in the underweb. They didn't know who Emily was. They only knew that when the package landed, the world would have to face its rot. But before the public fall, she needed something personal. Denise, living under a new identity, sent an encrypted ping. "You're not going to like this." Attached was a 30-second clip. Shaky footage of Sophia, thinner, eyes hollow, sitting in a glass cell. No words, no movement. A male voice in the background murmured, "An emotional bond will always be the weak point." Emily closed the video with her fists shaking. This wasn't past tense, it was now. She tapped an old contact, a former Black Ops informant. In exchange for silence, he handed over a thumb drive, complete schematics of the private structure beneath Connors' building. The general didn't sleep there, he lived beneath it. A bunker, 2 access points, a security net designed by war veterans. Even perfect mazes have seams. Emily always found the seam. The night before she moved, Emily shut out the world, prepped gear, walked the route, wrote her sister's name on a strip of tape and wrapped it around her wrist. For the first time, she hesitated. Not from fear, because she knew crossing the next threshold meant no way back. From above, the city looked calm, but in the heart of power, a hunter was loading the last round against an empire built on silence, pain, and manipulation. The plan was simple: get into the bunker, take Connors alive, stream his confession in real time, make him the living proof. Simple didn't mean easy. As she crossed the sub-basement garage, silent as breath, another move was already in play. The general knew she was coming, and he'd prepared something even she wasn't ready for. Emily dropped 2 levels below street, without a footprint on camera. A stolen security badge she'd seeded into the system hours earlier made her invisible to the optics. Steel-lined halls, doors asking for prints and passphrases. The bunker wasn't a shelter, it was a vault for secrets never meant to be breached. Her heartbeat drummed low and steady. No more plans, only the mission and her sister's name tied to her wrist like an anchor. At the core, a blast door sealed the final approach. She didn't waste a second. A microcharge, placed dead center, step back. A clean detonation, no alarms, no echo. On the other side, he was waiting. Matthew Connors sat behind a glass desk, hands folded, face composed. Not surprised, not afraid. Around him, 4 screens rolled hidden footage. Emily at Raven Rock, Blackridge, the motel, the DC rooftop. He'd been watching for weeks. "Knew you'd come," he said, voice gravel and calculation. "Didn't think you'd take this long." Emily raised the gun. "Where is she?" "You know where she is. What you really want," he tilted his head, "is the why." She breathed in, finger tight on the trigger, but held her ground. The room was a trap. She knew that. She just didn't know how big. Connors stood and faced the glass wall behind him, a voice command. Panels went transparent. On the other side, a white room, sterile, Sophia, sitting. Empty stare, lines threaded into her neck and arms. Alive, but dimmed. Emily moved without thinking, 2 steps forward, when the general lifted a small remote. 1 more step, and her vitals drop. She stopped. "That's not necessary." "It is. You need to understand. Sophia wasn't a victim. She was a choice." Emily's jaw locked. "You used her. She volunteered. She wanted in. For you." Something inside Emily fractured. He tapped a second clip. Sophia's voice filled the room. "If I do this, will she be spared?" "If you accept the process, yes," his voice answered. "Then do it. I can take it. She doesn't need to come back to this." Emily sank to her knees. The image wasn't submission. It was sacrifice. Connors watched, satisfied but restrained. "You were forged for war." She wasn't. And still she stepped where you were meant to go, for love. And now you're burning the world to save her, when she chose to be broken for you. Emily rose slowly, holstered the gun. Not mercy, precision. She crossed the room, snapped the remote from his hand with a single strike, and before he could react, slid a curved blade into the right side of his chest, between the ribs, twisting until the breath cut out. "I came for her, and to erase you." The general dropped, choking on silence. Emily cracked the medical lock, rushed to Sophia, pulled tubes and lines. The vitals wavered, then held. "You're coming back," she whispered. "Even if you don't know me, even if you never speak again, I'll carry you the rest of the way." By the time the system crashed and the sirens started, she had Sophia in her arms. She didn't run. She walked, one step at a time. A rescue, a return. Outside, chaos. Helicopters, sirens. Red lights tearing the night. Emily crossed the garage like a spectre carrying a promise. Agents moved in, but didn't fire. Something in the tableau disarmed them. Sophia in her arms, blood on the floor, and the name Connors blinking out of the system. By morning, his confession was everywhere. A country watched the truth unspool. Black operations, human experiments, orders issued from offices hidden beneath foundations of lies. Emily vanished again, with Sophia. Two names crossed off, two shadows living beyond files and codes. For those who watched to the end, only one certainty remained. Emily Carter wasn't fighting for justice. She was fighting for memory. And as long as there were secrets buried, she would come back. The weeks following the collapse of Operation Connors were marked by a heavy, unsettling silence. There were no official statements, no mass arrests. The names involved vanished quietly, fired, reassigned to irrelevant posts, erased from sight. The documents, no matter how damning, were dismissed by authorities as inconclusive. The structure didn't fall, it simply reshaped itself. But fear had already been planted. No one in the intelligence corridors spoke Emily Carter's name aloud anymore. She had become a symbol of something even the top brass didn't know how to contain. An agent who broke the line for a single life, and in doing so, toppled an empire. Sophia was placed in an off-the-grid clinic under a false identity and light surveillance. Doctors said she would never be the same. Emily never asked for details. She spent her days at her sister's bedside, reading aloud, as if words could rebuild a ship that had already sunk. She no longer carried weapons, no assignments. The war was over, or at least on pause. But inside her, the battlefield still burned. Every choice had left scars, the wound on her shoulder, Harper's vacant stare in the infirmary, the general's body collapsing in silence. There was no glory, only consequence. A journalist tried to track her down. She saw him from a distance, snapping photos with a long lens, but never approached. She let him take what he came for, a silhouette on a hilltop, holding the hand of someone who no longer saw the world the same way. The story hit the cover of an investigative magazine. The woman who silenced the invisible war. No names, not hers, not Sophia's. But the truth was there, and that was enough. Somewhere else, another prison rose, fully digital, no direct human oversight, run entirely by algorithms, clean, efficient, silent. But whispers spread that a woman with short hair had been seen walking the concrete blocks, watching, searching for cracks no one else could see. Because Emily Carter wasn't a hero, and she wasn't a vigilante. She was the reminder that when the system fails, someone always pays the price. And this time, she had decided it would never be her sister again. 3 years later, on a back road in Arizona, an old pickup rolled into a deserted gas station. The woman who stepped out wore worn jeans, a low cap, and an easy stride. She bought a newspaper and a cup of coffee. On the last page of the paper, a small note read, "Inmates vanish from new experimental prison in Nevada. Government denies active operation." She folded the page, stared at the horizon in silence, and went back to the truck. Sophia slept in the back seat. Emily turned the key in the ignition. No rush, because some wars never really end. She walked in without a word, and within seconds dropped the prison's most feared bully in front of everyone. But what nobody expected was that this victory was only the beginning. Emily Carter didn't just take down Harper, she tore an entire system apart from the inside. If this story kept you hooked until now, it proves you felt the weight of every revelation. Now tell me, what would you have done in her place? Drop your favorite moment in the comments, share this with someone who loves a story full of twists, and make sure to follow the channel, because the next missions are going to be even more intense.